some maximum length of each sprinkler pipe?
Yes. So we did it at 8 meters,
Yeah.
12 meters, and 15 meters as a reference points.
Yeah.
So you can go as far as 15, but we say normally you limit it to 12 meters max. And that's going to depend on the nozzle that you choose, because you have different pressures and different flows for each nozzle. But it's all part of the hydraulic calculation. So the hydraulic calculation will be the exact same as you would do for a sprinkler system, or residential sprinkler system.
Is it a requirement in Insta to have this test well? I'm not sure that there is a requirement.
The requirement in Insta in Norway, or at least we have it on, because we don't make a difference between type 1, 2, and 3. We can design for 4 regardless, 4 nozzles. So on our pump set, you have the flow meter, or you should have a connection for flow meter at the pump set, not out the, but you can do it here as well. But you can then prove from the pump set, and that's part of the yearly maintenance routine that you have to check off, that you check that.
Yeah. One question regarding if you're using water meter system in a commercial building.
Yeah.
Are there some limitations regarding heights of the building?
Yes.
How do you solve if you exceed the maximum?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Guy. So the tests that we do are standards. So the maximum ceiling height is 5 meters typically. So what then if you have a lot of times we get to schools with the gymnasiums in the schools, they're oftentimes 6.5 meters. So the guideline or the standard says we have to then consider above what you've tested to. So the consultant and the designer would have to then consult, are we going to exceed that? And what will we in fact do if we're going to exceed it? So because this is coming up, I sent this off to Sintef in Norway, which is now also RISE in Norway, that had tested with our 5 meter to do an assessment. So Sintef as a third party has evaluated, and they come with 6.5 meters on the gymnasiums. Okay. Now without doing any tightening of the spacing, right? But the first thing is obviously, what's the consideration here? We have the fire load. And then you have draft conditions. Is this significantly different than what it would be at 5 meters, right? And then you can make some considerations. For all of you who have been doing work with existing buildings, it's impossible to make it fit the standard. You have to make assessments throughout the building, right? So some considerations have to be done. The important thing then, because there's going to be more and more of this in Norway anyway, third-party inspectors come, right? So when the third-party inspector comes and says, oh, here you have 6 meters ceiling height, that's past what it's been tested for. If there was a note then in the documentation saying, hey, we have exceeded 5 meters, this is the reason why, this has been considered, this and that, then it's much easier for the inspector to say, okay, well, it's been evaluated. So that's the important thing, and that's hard for us to make sure our clients are leaving all that documentation that is required.
But in some cases you have a higher building than 6. It happens you have up to 9. What do you do then if you have more than 6, more than 7?
Yeah. So in many of those cases, we wouldn't be able to deliver. We did do fire testing in January in Denmark. We tested with the church organization in Norway because they have a lot of these heritage churches. We're testing at 9 meters nozzles. The wall itself is 7 meters high, and then was over 40-degree roof angle. And we tested, they asked us to come as part of the project to test this. It was both inside and outside. It was a pretty big fire load, 7 Euro pallets. They were stacked 5 up under a heptane vat. And then they stacked the last 2 like that. And then they had wooden construction the whole way up. They lit this thing up and it grew pretty high. So you had flame heights of 8 meters. And the suppression, and we were the third one to come. So they had tested with high pressure, with sprinkler, and then when we came, the setup was already there in the ceiling, the pipework, and it was not according to our manual. We would have placed the nozzles differently. but they said it was the first time they had seen actually fires extinguished.
At what pressure then?
I ran that with 3 bars. That was with our Prev 5 nozzle at 5 meters, tested at 5. But we ran that at 3 bars instead of 2.4. A little more flow, but the flow wasn't a concern of the church. So, but when we position the nozzle the way our design manual says to position it, a much better result. So it's possible, it's just that for us, you know, we have to spend a lot of money to set these tests up. You know, the fire labs, they cost.
That's the problem with these commercial buildings, that you have different heights.
Yeah. But for those, I mean, there are exceptions where you say, okay, we have everything for the parking car garage, we have the apartments or the office building taken care of, but there's the reception area, the vestibule, right? Now, I don't know how sprinkler does it, because they operate on the same bulb, right? Water comes down, regardless. We spray as well as sprinklers, and I know in terms of operation and suppression it works, but somehow it's okay if you just put a sprinkler head there. I think though more and more are using alternative methods, because in a vestibule you typically don't have a huge fire load positioned, right? So what is actually going to burn here? There could be smoke extraction and other things that we consider instead. But I know another water mist company has taken what they call atrium tests. Okay, so since they're working on the same type of pressures that we do, we could potentially combine, you know, the system. It would be the same pump set based on same type of pressures. So it's possible. But obviously, that's one of the first things we ask. You know, when somebody comes to us with a project, what type of ceiling heights are we looking at? You know. It's one consideration. Any others? Yeah.
The area of operation per sprinkler.
Yeah.
Is that in the standard, or
No,
what's the
that's-
average area of operation?
Yeah. That's going to be it's totally dependent on what you have tested too. So for us, you have 16, 16, 16 square meters. 16, 16, 20.25. So when we go to the fire lab, now this nozzle and this nozzle is tested for the same test. Here we use 5.2 bar, 16 square meters. Here we use 2.2 bars. So I'm trying just to stretch it a little more, because I know this, as long as the suppression is there, you know, we're taking care of the fire, temperature, fire load. So then this becomes more competitive compared to residential sprinkler. But we could also test the same application with a nozzle that would use, this uses 32 liters, this uses 43. So maybe we would look at a nozzle using 22 with same type of, or a little higher pressure. This is 8.4 bar. On our website, there are fire videos that you can you can see, not from the fire labs, but just with fire departments. They've asked us to come and look at. So if you go on the website, you go to water mist. Here you have, for those of you who are interested in the documentation, I'll put out the actual summary of the reports from the different fire labs, so you can see the summary. And then below that, you have different fire tests. So here you have inside a residential, here you have a huge wood burning fire. And this is on the second, so this is on the first floor, the fire starts down here, 6-7 meters up to the nozzles here. And this is in a barn, they've taken out the windows, open doors and everything, huge fire load, very effective. And here's outside, we tested for, this is again for the church many years ago, with outside fire. So you can mix and match, and this has nothing to do with documentation above, this is just for show, you know, of water mist. But this residential video here shows 3 different scenarios here, so you can go and look at that one. And then all the data sheets, of course, are, so when you look at the products, you would just go to find what you're interested in looking at. So if you wanted them to see the nozzles, so say you wanted to download here, and then you would find the nozzle, what type of application, and it'll tell you, here's the bar, here's the pressure, here's the standby pressure, the K factor you would use. And then you have the bulb, and then as you come down to installation, further on to operation maintenance, and then you come here to the design. So this is residential domestic, 4x4, maximum 4, minimum 2. And then you have the maximum ceiling height for residential, 3.5, according to the fire test that we took. This is the fire test protocol used. So for each and every nozzle, you have those details. And then of course, if you go to Mr. if you're interested in the systems, they have also the manual, okay? That goes through the design, the installation, the maintenance. And that's a course that we run. Typically takes 4 hours. And that requires your basic knowledge in sprinklers already. So we talk about, many of the topics we're going through here today. Yes?
Are you able to use the water system in dry system?
Yeah. But again, you're limited then to using the only dry system that we use is we're using with a stainless steel pipe. So we would be the press fittings. That's the only system that we have available for dry. There's a lot of dry, in the attics in Norway, you have attics, and you have dry systems. Often you put a compressor on the system to avoid the, what's it called? Evaporation, yeah. And then for those type of systems, we would use the nozzle that's upright. So for dry systems, you use this nozzle. So this nozzle is identical, except this one is down and this one is up on top of the pipe.
Is there a side wall?
Yes.
Yeah.
Here.
Okay.
That's only for residential.
Yeah.
Commercial, only pendant. There is no standard for it. So for the residential, we use the residential sprinkler standard because the Insta and the British standards don't have sidewall tests. So we use to prove as good or better results compared to residential. So that's the UL 1626.
Just one question. Why isn't there copper pipes? Why are you not able to? Is that something that's not?
Copper will tend to, you will get oxygen mixed in, and it will become like a gooey little, greenish. It's not good over time. So my partner, the inventor of the technology here, he used to be a seaman, was all over the world with ships, and he had responsibility for the suppression systems. And back then was a lot of sprinklers used and different type of piping. And he said everything is, unless it's stainless steel, and even stainless steel in certain environments, you have to be careful for. Okay. But for most environments, for what we're talking about, that's really good. But he's always said no to anything but corrosion free.
Because you have the water inside is it's not going anywhere. It stays there.
Yeah, but you still have, without the oxygen barrier, though. So that's why we have an oxygen barrier on the pipe and pipe. All right. I'll be around after if anybody wants coffee or questions afterwards. I'll be happy to take that. I appreciate the time. Thank you for your attention.
Jag vet inte, vi ska Jag ska presentera till Christian.
Jag vill bara